Hey everybody, Jem Schofield here, and welcome to the Nanlux Evoke 150C and 600C video training series. This is part 2 of 2 at the bench with these lights, where we're going to be talking about software, connectivity, all kinds of stuff. So let's get into it. So now it's time to get into connectivity and using these fixtures. So we'll go through the menus and how to operate it. And I've got some different things for that. First thing I want to do is just talk about the similarities and differences on these two fixtures from a usability standpoint. With the 150C here, you'll see that there are 2 dials/buttons, and with the 600C, there are 3 dials/buttons. There's also one additional button up here on the 600C, which is called preset, and I'll take you through that in a couple of minutes and how to use it. So with the 150C, the right dial is how I am choosing a particular setting or parameter. So if I wanted to choose correlated color temperature, I would select that, depress the button, and go in, and now I can access those parameters. And then the left-hand dial is how I change the value of a particular parameter. So I'm changing the correlated color temperature here. I'm going to go back over here to intensity, use that left dial to change the intensity. And then you can see that if I depress that left button, it will temporarily dim the light. I can still access all of my parameters and change them, and then press that button again. Works identically on the 600C. And so now we can look at the difference between the 2 and the 3 dials on these two fixtures. If I step back out to mode here, yes, I'm still using that right-hand dial to select a particular parameter and depressing it to select and go into those options. But now that I'm in correlated color temperature, for instance, each one of these dials is dedicated to those parameters. So unlike this one, where I am selecting a particular parameter and using the left dial to change the value, when I'm in here, I can just use those individual dials here to change the values. And right now I'm changing the green magenta tint on the lights. And by the way, you can do this to a +200 for a green tint, to a -200 for a magenta tint. So anything you're doing to the right is adding green. If you're going to the left, it's adding magenta. So this is a great feature because when you're in production, oftentimes we're in environments where the lighting in the environment is skewing more green or more magenta. Well, you could actually go ahead and make adjustments to that green tint of your light to match the entire environment. So that's a great, great feature on these fixtures. So let's talk about connectivity beyond using the onboard controls for these lights. And there's so many different ways to connect to the 150C and the 600C. I'm going to go over a couple of the ones that I'm using on a regular basis, but I do want to mention that on the 600C, we do have DMX in and DMX out. So if you wanted to hardwire that way, you could. And speaking of DMX, and I'm just going to go into the menu here on this fixture here and also on the 600C. When we're talking about connecting to these lights and actually controlling these lights, one of the most important things that you can do is to assign each of them their own individual DMX address. If you don't, and 2 lights have the same DMX address, you will bump into problems in terms of controlling those lights, whether it is remotely from a smartphone, a tablet, from a lighting board, whatever it is that you're doing, you need to make sure that they have their own DMX address. Okay, so I'm going to come out of here to the main menu, and we're going to talk about how to connect to them in different ways. So first of all, if I go over here to wireless control, same thing on this light, and we take a look at the options, you will see that they are identical. And there are a number of ways that we can connect. The first one, which I'm just going to go ahead and tilt this light so you can see it, is that both of these lights here have NFC or near field communication capabilities. So if you have a device like I do here, this particular iPhone, that has the ability to connect through NFC, and I'm just going to give you a little tip here. When you're doing this, if you are using something like a case, sometimes that can be a little bit of a problem. So what I have right here is the NanLink app. Make sure you download the latest version. This is NanLink 2.0. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new scene and I'm going to give it a name. And in this case, we're just going to connect to the 150C. So I'm just going to call it 150C and create that. So I'm going to go ahead and press new fixture, and then I'm going to get three choices: via Bluetooth, via 2.4 gigahertz, or via NFC or near field communications. I'm going to choose that, and then it's going to say ready to scan, and basically I'm going to put that up to that NFC area. You'll see here that my fixture has actually been recognized. I'm going to say done, and then it's going to set up that Evoke 150C as my first fixture inside of this scene. And then I can go inside of here, and now I'm controlling the light through the NanLink app. I can change the intensity, correlated color temperature, I can dim the light, I can do my plus minus green tint, and then I start to access and can control the light from here for all of the other options that are available as well. All right, so that's how easy it is to connect over NFC. Let's go ahead and take a look at how we connect using Bluetooth. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use an iPad, and most of the time, in general for filmmaking, it's a lot easier to use a tablet like this than it is to use a smartphone, because this device is being used for so many other things. So I've already created a scene here, and I'm going to go into it. It's called Barn, and you can see that I have a number of different fixtures that I have added. But let me show you how to actually connect via Bluetooth just so you can see that. So I'm going to go out of here, and I'm going to create a brand new scene, and we'll call this scene 600C. Go into that brand new scene, and just like I did before with the NFC connection, I'm going to choose new fixture. Now what's important here is I'm going to go into my Bluetooth settings, and I am going to have to reset the Bluetooth settings on my fixture in order for it to be recognized and added to the app. So I'll say new fixture, I'll say via Bluetooth, and then I'm going to go ahead and reset my Bluetooth on my device here. And then you'll see here that the 600C has shown up. I'm just going to go ahead and select and set up the fixture. And now that fixture is the first fixture inside of my scene. I can go into that fixture. I can start controlling that fixture and doing all of the things that I want to do. But what if you're a lighting designer or a lighting programmer who's working on productions? Well, that's where other options really come into play. We basically have three different menu items over here that are relevant to controlling these lights. The first is address/DMX. The second is wireless control, and the third is network settings. So again, if you're a lighting programmer, you're a lighting designer, you're setting up lots of different lights for productions, whether they're in a fixed location like a theater, or you're moving from location to different sets, these are the options that you're really going to need when you need to set up the lights in those different scenarios. Okay, last thing I want to talk about in terms of connectivity here, and then we'll jump into some of the menus and look at a few other parameters, is this right here. This is the WCEXT. This is a wired controller that you can use. It comes with the 600C, and it is an optional accessory for the 150C. So basically, why would you want to use this? Well, the main reason that you would use this, and this is the cable that comes with it, is when you are rigging these lights in places that are hard to reach and you are not using wireless controls. You'll notice also there's a magnetized area that is on the 600C, and that allows you to just mount the WCEXT to the fixture. So basically, we're just going to go ahead and take this WCEXT. Let me just take that off for a second. And at the top here, there is a place to attach and plug this in. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side of the light. So we're going to plug that in over here to the EXT port. So we've attached it. And as soon as I do that, you will see that this turns on and lights up. And now I have full control of the device right here. This is extremely handy for us when we are crews of just 2, 3, 5 people, because this way we can just rig our lights and we can control them very easily from that lighting fixture's location. But again, we always have the option to control wirelessly if we need to. I'm going to stick with the wired controller now because it's an easy way for me to go through these menus and show you some other options. So I'm going to go ahead and go into light control. This one's important. We have 3 options for dimming increment. You have a 0.1%, which will take and change the increments by 0.1% throughout the entire 0 to 100% range. So if I go back over here to mode, and I start changing my values here, you will see that I am doing that in 0.1% increments. Go back over here to menu, light control dimming increment. I can change it to 0.1% below 10%. So if I go ahead and set that up and select it, you will see that if I'm above 10%, it's in 1% increments. But if I get to that 10% and below value, it's doing it in 0.1% increments. One more time inside of here, I can go in and I can change this to just 1%. And of course, if I do that, then it doesn't matter if I'm below or above 10%, it's always changing in 1% increments overall. Okay, so that's that feature. And then also in there, zoom control, when we actually are attaching things like the FL22E, which is that motorized Fresnel attachment to something like the 600C, I can use the middle knob to change the beam angle to a tighter beam angle and the right knob for a broader beam angle. And that will work both for the onboard controls and for the wired controller. And let's get into fixture settings. Fan control, also very important. Under fan control, you'll see the first option is smart. I would say that's the one that most people are going to use in most situations because it's going to keep the fan noise at a minimum when you are doing things like recording dialogue, but it will ramp those fans up when the temperature starts to increase. The second option is high speed. As soon as you turn that on, you're going to hear that fan kick in. This is a constant high speed. And this is the setting I would recommend if you're using these lights outdoors. You're in any kind of situation where sound recording isn't the big consideration. There's your low speed. And if I go in here to mode, you will see, and this is important, that on low speed, you have a maximum output limited on the 600C to 50%. Then we can turn the fan off completely. So you can see that with the fan off, it's limiting the output of the 600C to 15%. And then the last option is pause. All right, clean things up a little bit, and we're going to go through the different modes that are on the light. And as I said before, everything that I'm doing here on the wired external controller is identical to what would happen here, except for this preset button on the 600C. So let's deal with that first. Let's go into our settings here, and let's just say that I wanted to set this up a particular way in terms of my correlated color temperature, my intensity, and my green magenta shift. And this is what I wanted to use as a preset. Well, we have this preset button here. You're going to do a long hold. It's going to go into the preset menu, and then you're going to choose one of these empty banks here. And then you're going to go ahead and press the button, and that will be saved. So now we can recall at any point that particular preset. So if I go back out to my mode here, and I'll change this to something completely different. I go over to my preset menu and I'm going to go ahead and select that. You can see it goes back to that preset that I saved. Back to this controller now. So I'm going to go back to mode. I'm going to choose correlated color temperature. Then if I press the center button on either of these, it will cycle through different correlated color temperature presets, all the way from 1000 to 20,000 Kelvin. So you can see that actually happening there. And then in terms of green magenta, if I press the button here or here, it will automatically reset that to a value of 0. Okay, back to the modes. We're going to go into the second mode option, which is HSI, which stands for hue, saturation, intensity. I'm going to go into that. And you can see here that we have, with our 3 dials, the ability to change the intensity of the light itself, the hue from 0 to 360 degrees. So you can see it cycling through those different hues. And then the saturation of that particular color that we are choosing. And this is based on a 5600 Kelvin correlated color temperature. So if I take all of that saturation out of the light, we're effectively looking at a 5600 Kelvin output from here. The disadvantage, if you're not really using color, is we don't have that green magenta shift or tint that we can use when we are in this mode. But this is really where you start to go in and create intense saturated colored light inside of this menu. And it's very repeatable. So if you knew you wanted to go into the blues, then you could do that. And then you can decide how saturated or not. Right now we're at 100% saturation. Okay, back over to mode. We're going to go to an area which I don't use very oftentimes, but again, if you're a lighting designer or a lighting programmer, you would probably go into the RGB W mode, and this lets you dial in very precise values for red, green, blue, and white. So you can just use that right knob to select the parameter. Once it's selected, use the middle knob to change the value. And then you still have a dedicated intensity knob here on the left-hand side. Back to modes. I'm going to go over here to XY. Again, probably for lighting designers, lighting programmers. And what you can do here is you can dial in extremely precise XY values for your particular light fixture. Not something I'm doing very often, but having the feature in the light is great. Back to mode, we're going to go over here to gel. This is a big one. So let's just go through this. The first thing is, again, left dial intensity. Then you choose your parameters with the right dial. The first one is, how are you rating your light as a base if you're going to gel it? Are you basing that light on a 5600 or a 3200 Kelvin output? This goes back to how we were gelling HMIs for daylight balanced light, or we were taking tungsten hot light fixtures and balancing those with gels. So those would be 3200. Daylight 5600, and then from there you can go in and choose whether or not you are applying to that color temperature, 3200 or 5600, Roscoe or Lee gels. So we'll take a look at Lee right now. We'll go into the gel values, and then you can start to choose your individual gels that are being applied, in this case, to 5600 Kelvin. So those are some of the Lee gels. And then I can go back over here and switch this over to Roscoe. And now you can see that when I go to my gels and I start to change those, that I am applying Roscoe gels. So lots of options here in terms of gel mode. Back to mode here, and we're going to go ahead and check out our effects. And there are a lot of them inside of the 150C and 600C. Same effects, same light engine. We're going to go up here to hue loop and select that. And you can see I can then choose my parameters. Dim, the effect that I'm applying. I can choose my hue range. In this case, it's 0 to 360 degrees, so all of the hues. I can choose how saturated I want that to be. Middle dial here to turn down that saturation or increase it. And then I can change the speed. The higher the number, the longer it's going to take to go through those different hues. The shorter the number in terms of the speed, the faster it's going to cycle through each of those different colors. Now I'm going to go back and take a look at correlated color temperature loop. You can see here that I can choose my starting correlated color temperature. In this case, I'm going to start at 1000 Kelvin, the warmest light possible, and go all the way up to 20,000. But if I wanted to limit that, I could just go ahead and dial that CCT range down. And let's just say I wanted to do 1,000 to 10,000. Let's go ahead and choose a different effect. And I can do that quite easily from within an effect mode. I just choose effect, and then I take the middle dial, and now I can actually cycle through the different effects modes that are inside of here with lots and lots of control in terms of what you can do with them. So it's pretty great in terms of what you can do. So that's part 2 at the bench with the Nanlux Evoke 150C and 600C. Make sure you check out the on-location video as well, where we take these lights, accessories, and modifiers out into the real world for practical use. The goal here, as always, is education, so I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching.